My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a comic book this week.
I watched a series. This is Illiterate. Welcome. This week we're doing The Boys. Taylor, thank you so much for bringing this to me. I did not know anything about this. I've seen briefest of ads that I did not pay attention to on TV and Amazon Stream, all that kind of, I've seen images, but this washed over me, totally ignored it. Had no concept of the comic book. I just wanted to start that off by saying thank you, because this is one I didn't know anything about.
And Evan enjoyed it, or he sort of enjoyed it.
I mean, I loved it, but we'll get in. Yeah.
And listener, you may not know anything about it, but it's on Amazon Prime.
Yes, the series is out on Amazon Prime now. I believe it came out last Friday.
Yeah, and so I read the comic book series, which is 72 issues, including some offshoot mini-series little moments. But it's like a full big story that happens in the comic book, and I read a significant amount of them, and then skimmed through some of the other ones and got some bullet points, and did a bunch of research as usual. We're going to go into why this isn't being made now, and either if you want to pick up the comics or watch the show, probably what you're going to get out of either of them. And what in the world, how does this fit into the literary scope of things?
This is the most interesting idea in the superhero genre that I have come across in a long time.
And Evan knows his superheroes.
This is really challenging stuff. This, so I watched a few episodes. I watched 2.5 episodes, and I'm going to keep watching, even though the tone of this thing, and we'll get into this. Every piece of this is conflicting. They have flipped the superhero tropes on their heads. The villains are anti-villains. The heroes are anti-heroes.
Yeah.
The whole way, it feels like it has a classic structure, but the whole time you feel like you want to screech the brakes down and go backwards, because that you're in the wrong. Because I am totally, and before we really get into it, I am so in on what would be the villain's point of view, and I love it. But this is going to tear apart everything you think about superheroes. This goes a step further than Watchmen by far, and brings it into the moment right now that we're having culturally. This couldn't be any more fresh. I'm pretty blown away.
So the premise is we're set in a world where superheroes exist. The story in the comics series takes place between 2006 and 2008. This is not DC, Marvel, Batman, Superman, any of that stuff. It's all made up, but all of the characters are allegories and reflections of Superman, Batman.
You'll see shades. You'll get what they're pointing at.
But in this world, it's almost, in the comic books, maybe they change it a bit for the show, but it's very much like a political thriller, conspiracy theory, the machinations of politics and corporations, because these superheroes are corrupted by the celebrity status and the politics and the scandal and the conspiracy of what it would be to be a superhero and have no villains. This
is them taking those ideas to the nth degree. These heroes are, they're outright disgusting, but they're at the same time they're real. We're really talking about, and I think this is such an interesting answer to the idea of the Nolan Batman films of like, well, we want to make Batman real. And we've been doing that for about 10 years, and we're really starting to run that ditch dry, and we're not having any traction there anymore. And I've been wondering, what is the next step? How is this going to end? Because these movies just keep coming out, and they keep raising the ticket prices.
And adding more Benedict Cumberbatch.
So I've been waiting to see what this next step is going to be.
And it's graphic and sexual and dark, and we talked about Watchmen before, so you might be thinking, old news, I know Watchmen. But this takes it to 110 in the sense that the characters have so much behind them as well, and maybe this grows in the series, but like, you get how a superhero would become a monster, and how you would need, or in a reflection of our times, corporations and
how you can
politics.
abuse power, how you can be protected by power. they feed into all of it at every turn, any opportunity they can. I mean, the themes are out front and center. I mean,
And the superheroes are struggling with their sexual deviancy or sexual orientation
outright.
or
I mean, this
stuff.
is outright.
And that's being suppressed by the corporations that are sponsoring them, which then the government is worried because they might use, the corporations that sponsor the superheroes to take over the industrial military complex. So the whole premise of the show, then why it's called The Boys, and this is the even more interesting take on it, because you could just have that be the story, and follow somebody there. But the boys are a secret CIA task squad, in the comic books at least, that are charged with monitoring the superhero community and have been, and they've been sponsored over time since, World War II or whatever, with keeping this thing in check and killing them off if need be and blackmailing them if need be. Because the government is worried about the superheroes taking over, and the superheroes are worried about the government being involved. But then there's also all this other collusion with, extra organizations from other countries and other superhero groups that come up, and it's a whole big mess. So if you love, like I said, political thriller, conspiracy stuff, also with a ton of violence and sexual content, but to a point.
Let me just give you a taste of what what happens just right off right in the show. And this is so funny because I'm like, the villain?
Yeah.
You get introduced to what you are, I guess, is the villain, and you get his development all in one scene, and you get exactly why he becomes whatever he's going to become in one scene. The catalyst is just hits you like a ton of bricks, and I mean like a ton of bricks. It's him and his girlfriend just like walking down the street, basically.
The guy's name is Hugh.
Yeah.
In the comic. Yeah.
And his girlfriend just gets blown away by a superhero that's chasing somebody. Just it gets exploded through the street. He runs through her, and just in a moment's instance, she's just gone.
Yeah. Like a Flash character, like a super speed superhero, just decimates her.
And their dialogue is so keyed in, and you start thinking about like, oh, okay, we're gonna follow these two, and like, oh, well, what's gonna happen with them? I was really like interested in their conversation. Even I was just like really drawn, and it slaps you in the face, and immediately I go, oh no. He's gonna try to take them down, and immediately I start seeing how the show is gonna start unfolding, and seeing going back into I think what it seems like the comic book leans a little bit more into is the idea, the politicism of it all, the spectacle of it all, the cover-ups, all of those types of things. Seeing the catalyst of it all as being this girl's swift death, and then see how it gets mitigated and kind of hushed and covered up.
And they pay him off some sum and be like, whatever, this is the casualties of having superheroes. Kind of reminds me of the Incredibles thing where they're like, Mr. Sweden didn't want to be saved. Yeah.
So take the haha fun Pixar idea of like, oh man, well, thank God superheroes don't really exist because it could get really strange real quick. Well, yeah. Now we get to see it.
And in this world, superheroes don't give a crap about anybody. They've got their own problems. There's a quote,
they're whole humans. They're whole people.
And there's a quote from the comic where, because Hugh gets hired by the leader of the boys, who's called the Butcher, and then there's these other characters that are also part of this CIA task squad.
I love this because you know way more than even I do, and even you don't even know where it all goes. So this is I'm into it. This is so much fun.
The guy, the Butcher, he's like, well, he comes to Hugh because he knows that this guy's got a vendetta and this guy's into conspiracy, and everything's been hushed up in his life. And we learn later that the Butcher, obviously, all of these characters that are a part of the boys have had something happen to them in relation to superheroes that gives them a vendetta. Because in the comic, it's so grotesque and malicious and violent and over the top. Like, I can't even describe the imagery and the pictures. And
so
whatnot.
We won't.
Yeah. Blood and gore and sex and gruesomeness all over the place. But this Butcher character says, in regards to these superheroes, if you can dodge bullets or outrun tachyons or swim across the sun, you've better things to do than save the world for the 100th effing time. None of these superheroes are into that at all. And there's no supervillains. I don't know how this plays out in the TV series, but maybe it doesn't really matter. But there's a big part of the comic book is this thing called Compound V.
Right, and there's whispers of this. I am not this. It's only been introduced.
Yeah.
But yes, it is in.
Yeah.
It is in the
So
series.
this Compound V comes in because, and this won't spoil too much, I don't think. This was with this big corporation that created, and you realize, oh, they created the
Yeah.
superheroes. Like
Yeah,
everybody that
yeah.
has superpowers had gotten this thing, and the main Superman guy was all a setup cover up, and it looked like an alien that crash landed. It was a little kid, not even in a spaceship or whatever, but they had bred him as a child growing up in a lab in a factory and whatever to be this main superhero character. And you could imagine
that part. That's cool. Yeah,
and
that's
I
awesome.
think they'll put it in the show, but you can imagine the level of crazy psychosis that would give to be like, oh, I was a lab experiment my whole life to be this thing, and now I'm a god with no parents that nobody trusts.
Well, and it's interesting. Just a little side point there. When you say there's no super villains, it's because there's a company making money off of the idea of superheroes. So they would all get folded into that. Like and I'm thinking, if I'm talent, if I had superpowers, there's a company that's going to pay me and contract me, and I'll be famous and be a celebrity. And I'll go do that. Like it is absolutely just a bought title at that point. So the superheroes, supervillains, it's all a sham at this point.
Yeah. And so then the question becomes, there's the group called the Seven, which has the classic like Superman, Wonder Woman-esque characters. And Hugh asks the Butcher, he's like, they have superpowers. Like, how are we going to make an impression on them? So the people that are a part of the boys in the comic book series also have this compound V or 5 or whatever it is in them. And so the Butcher injects Hugh in with it when he isn't paying attention or whatever, and he's like, what in the world are you doing? Like, I didn't ask to be a part of this. And he's like, yeah, that's why you've hung around us for a week, like gathering in. Like, no, you're in. You need to be able to do this so that this is how we get back at them as we fight them. Like, this serum that I injected you with cost $13 billion. Don't ask how I got it. Like that kind of thing. Yeah. So then it gets, at least in the first 5 or 6 episodes of the comic, you see his progression in joining this group. He accidentally, because he doesn't understand his powers, kills one of these lesser superheroes and has kind of a fallout from that where he's like, that's not what I intended. You gave me this ability. And he's like, no. Like, we're just like, our job is to just control the situation. Now you've escalated it. Builds and builds and builds. There's a ton of nonsense. And I imagine the show has already been greenlit for a second season that they're going to make. Yeah. So they have a ton of material to go off of with the 72 comic series.
Yeah, and I wonder how closely they'll stick. And then just wonder what else will develop social politically in the real world between now and then.
Well, going into that, I guess, and the reason you thought this was so cogent and important right now is there's a main character who just joined the Seven, which is like the raunchy, weird superhero squad, and her name is Annie Starlight. And like I said, she just joined, and they like ask her to, or basically force her to do sexual favors, and like that's how you get on the team, and that's very
it's her and Hughie are the two things right up front in the pilot. So you have him. So that happens to him, and then this happens to him.
And so they're like, hey, if you wanted to be a part of the Seven, like you've got to please us or what have you. Which that's like page 7 of the comic, and you're like, oh, this thing is going to be crazy. Yeah, this is going to be like real world, like this stuff happens. Yeah. And we're seeing it come out in the media now where it's like, oh yeah, people
real
wanted
power dynamic.
Parts in movies and people wanted seats on the board and people make other people do this stuff. And it would happen with superheroes.
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. You think that superheroes wouldn't have some sort of hazing, and that some of them wouldn't have some sort of maybe sex addiction, or that there's problems. I mean, they're human beings. I mean, just because they can do extraordinary things doesn't mean they're extraordinarily, empathetic and know the answer to all their problems. It's like they're the same as us, but maybe they're a little stronger. They can have an ability, like they can turn invisible, but like that doesn't fix that that their wife doesn't talk to them, or whatever it is. It doesn't fix the problems.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, it may draw allusions to Watchmen or Kick-Ass or Wanted or things like that had more of that gritty,
Absolutely.
realistic superhero
So yeah,
quality.
those are the first two that I think of.
Hmm.
But this is just, I mean, Watchmen is the more, I would say that,
Literary.
yeah, exactly, is the more literary. But that, in terms of how overt it is with its themes, it's almost cute in comparison as to just like how much this is on the nose, wanting to talk about something very real in every instance.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, at least from the comic book, like I said, there's both pieces of media now based on this property. So if you're more into the
Yeah,
Amazon
yeah.
thing, watch that. If you're more into the comic, give it a look. They've compiled them into these big omnibus editions, so you can just read them all at once. That's what I did. But
That's the only way to do it.
but yeah, so with the comic book, I felt like the graphic nature of it really was shocking, and is just as shocking in, if you will put a link to the trailer in the show notes as well.
Totally.
But like they I can't even show that much really, but it's extremely graphic. But for me, reading the comic book, you just sit on almost like a painting or
Right.
this visual image, and you're like,
Yeah.
I want to flip this page because
Right.
I don't want to see
Right. I don't wanna
these
see-
people forcing this woman on,
Right.
or there's a scene like you realize, oh, when the superheroes die, they use the compound V to like prop them up as, like, oh, he survived, but then the person who's the superhero is actually just like a zombie, and they just throw them in the basement in their headquarters, and they're like running around in their own poop and like basically
Whoa.
crazy. And so that's what happens when Hugh kills this one superhero, that superhero comes back.
Oh, what?
And he's like, oh, I see even more now what's going on in
Oh
this world
my
of superheroes.
God.
So like seeing that, and what happens is Annie Starlight, the girl character that is the other secondary focus, is Hugh's story
Yeah.
and her story. She is down in the basement or whatever, they make her do stuff, and she sees this other superhero, and she's like, what in the, and then it's just a full panel page of this superhero just gnarled over like Gollum.
Oh
And you're
my
like, oh
gosh.
God, this is crazy.
Oh my
But because it's just a full page thing and you flip it and you're like, there was a certain tension and suspense I got when you just see her face like in a close-up and she's like, what the, and then you flip the page and it's the front,
Oh.
cover of that episode
Oh,
or that
wow.
book. So I think that might be more interesting for some readers or listeners. Like seeing the work of art, to me, made it more arresting. Or like you said, where they haze Hugh, or not haze him, but cover up when his girlfriend dies at the hands of a superhero
Oh,
thing.
that becomes so much of the pilot episode is the litigation and the red tape and the gloves that he gets treated with, and the company very much trying to protect their assets.
Yeah.
They lean into that for most of the episode, and it gets really disgusting real fast, just in terms of just like the contracts and the things that they're trying to get out of him without telling. And he has this whole fantasy almost basically where he's sitting down with the lawyer who's trying to basically get him to sign an NDA and pay him off basically. And he sits down with the lawyer, and the lawyer explains, wow, this is all pretty basic stuff here, boilerplate NDA. And then and Huey has this, what we realize later is a fantasy where he like tells him actually, he like picks apart everything the lawyer just said piece by piece. And it's like, actually, you're manipulating me here, and here. Like, and then he wakes up, and the lawyer's still at the end of his sentence. Like, you with me, Huey?
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus, no.
That's amazing. Yeah, because in the comic, the way that they do it, I enjoyed some of the stylistic elements that they have. It's a pretty classic comic in the way that they do it. But just when he is having that happen immediately, just shock to the system, flipping the first couple pages and having his girlfriend destroyed by a superhero, you're like, oh, this is going to be a different superhero kind of story. But then when they go through, it's the text bubbles, but it's just little shortened phrases from the lawyers, and it's like a whole montage, collage of him like going to work, these people coming to talk to him, and this and that, and being in a room and signing stuff and going to court and all this stuff. And the text bubbles are just these like snippets of words until it gets to him being alone, and you're like, oh, that's what it would be like. They would all be covered up, and he has no idea what's going on. It's a massive thing, and these superheroes are insanely powerful corporate icons.
In the show, that most of the episode is him in search of trying to even just get face to face with the actual superhero who did it. Because they don't even want to give him that, and he really wants an apology, and it is fight tooth and nail over the most basic human decency things for them to even admit that there's any kind of culpability here, that they're at fault in any way at all, and it's so legal. The human elements of it are totally taken out, so that the system can work. I mean, it's a beautiful portrait of just.
And
how
that's like
these
when you
things
say
get
there's
litigated out.
the villain is hard to make sense of. It definitely is, and from knowing this author, the system in place. And that's why also when you look at these superheroes, you might be listening to this and being like, "Oh, I don't like any of these characters." And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the point, but
Oh,
also
yeah.
they're not entirely at fault for them just being jerks and crazy
Right.
sex fiends and all
They're
that stuff.
around, even the characters that commit some of the most heinous atrocities have other parts to their whole they really are whole characters. And
Hmm.
that's the thing I found most shocking, is that there are so many of them and they are all so well developed. They are all have their own real stories going on.
Hmm.
They had to. They couldn't make their point any other way. I think they had to absolutely have every one of these characters have a legitimate reason. There is no fluff in this thing. There
Yeah.
is no filler anywhere in any corner of this thing that I saw. I mean, everything has a point.
Yeah. Like you said, like if you're going to play on the tropes of, oh, superheroes are just here to save you, and then you make them conflicted and confusing, there has to be depth
Right.
in there. And
Right.
that
And and I keep hearing this every time these superhero movies come out, about just like the kind of residual collateral damage that ends up getting done. And so it was interesting to see that, like, oh, a villain being made out of one of those instances. It's just an accident. It happened because this superhero had to go do this other thing,
Mhm.
but he ended up killing somebody.
And it's in the comic, you never get a sense that the boys are villains because they work for the government, they work for the CIA. They're just this task force SWAT team kind of thing. So you don't ever get the feel that, like, oh, we're the bad guys, we're the bad boys doing the wrong thing to save what people love,
Mhm.
because you never hardly get the outside world of just like, oh, everybody's loving on the superheroes. Oh, they're doing all the right thing, because you're only taking it from Hugh's perspective. It's like they're
Mhm.
all they're getting is files
Mhm.
and secret photos of horrible things that they've done and whatnot.
Man, when he and I think the first episode does end with him actually getting to meet the superhero that did, um, and he does another kind of fantasy flash thing where
Hmm.
he walks in and shakes his hand and everything covered in his girlfriend's blood,
Yeah.
just like dripping just the way it was on the street. And then you think almost for a second, I was present mindedly going, oh my God, like, did he just do it again, or what the hell? Why he's
Yeah.
covered in blood again? And then it switches in the middle of like the handshake that he's totally clean. And then I thought it was really getting into the psychosis of what it would be like to be on the other end of one of these crazy accidents, and really to see that they don't care. Nor does the superhero care. The company doesn't care. You're just a problem that they need to get rid of as quietly and as fast as possible.
Yeah, I'll say it again for the 29 millionth time, but like if you do want to look into this, be prepared because it's super graphic,
This is
super
the
mature, like not for, like I said, even by page 6 you're like, "Oh, there's an orgy of superheroes
oh
and
my
somebody's arms are ripped off and somebody's head is on the ground." Like,
This I was telling Taylor when he came in today before we started recording that I do not like watching this show, but it is great. I honestly I don't know if I will, how much I will continue watching or not. Like I am so, it is not fun to watch.
mhm,
It is difficult. It is very difficult to watch, but everything they're doing I love.
yeah.
So
And to see a
it's difficult.
different take on it, or a more unique way that does have to push the boundaries, because like you said, we've gotten into the rut of like, oh yeah, Peter Parker does this and he tries to do his best and then he saves, we have 45 versions of that now.
It's like if we've gotten to a point in our society that we keep telling these stories for a certain reason, we see something in them, something that we aspire to, something then that reassures us, something that feels good.
Hmm.
But at what point do we need to grow, and we need to
Is there a
start
delusion
expanding
there?
throughout
Yeah.
exactly? And at what point can it become a complete delusion, just a revolving cycle
Yeah.
of an almost devolving cycle?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about in the Hamlet thing, but the two phrases that I like to use, there's two types of stories. So there's the prescriptive tale, meaning like, hey, if you do this, then this will happen, and it's a good story. And then there's the
Hmm.
cautionary tale, which is like, hey, don't do this, or
Absolutely,
this will happen.
absolutely.
And certainly, what it sounds like what you're saying, like where we've gotten a ton of prescriptive tales about how to be a hero,
Right.
but we're not very keen on cautionary tales because they don't tend to work out
Well,
as well. But you still learn just
well,
as
it's
much.
contradictory to the idea of a superhero. So
Hmm.
the idea that a superhero could be corrupted, is, I think, really powerful. The people that we trust to make the right decisions, the people that we depend on.
Yeah.
Whoever that may be in your life, and the power structures anywhere. I mean, these stories are telling us something about what's going on in our real lives. But
and you might have to look away every so often, but it's worth at least thinking about it from this angle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were interested in how in the world this came to be.
Yeah, please. Yeah. So yes, all of it, because I'm so interested in. This is a comic book, but it came out a little while ago. It's still relatively recent, but it's not as fresh as the show I'm watching feels. So I kind of am interested in the whole deal there.
Yeah. So this comic book series came out in 2006, and it went on until 2012.
Right, and it's like super. It's super recent, but it's not. It's like all of the themes and as brazen as it's tackled. I'm like it seems so of the right now, so of the moment.
So what happened as far as the film stuff being made? The film was optioned in 2008. And Adam McKay was on it.
Oh,
who was the guy who did Anchorman and Talladega Nights and stuff.
Vice.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
And then from 2010 to 2013, all that floundered. It went away. Was difficult because it's being a film, and if you can imagine this just being condensed to 2 hours, like I said, the source material is so broad and vast, and there's so many different angles and characters that you can take in the story. So then in 2015, it got greenlit by Cinemax, and this is when Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were on it, and they came up with kind of like the first script with somebody else and got the wheels turning on it again. And then in 2017, it went to Amazon, they picked it up, and then they filmed it in 2018 and came out this year. But that's when Seth and Evan got on it.
The transition to Amazon is probably, and that's when all of the Me Too stuff started to happen.
But as far as making it happen, like I said, Seth Rogen, who you wouldn't necessarily think of being the creative voice behind this, the voice of Pumbaa now. So the guy who wrote this, Garth Ennis, he has always been in comic books. He came out with a comic book series called Preacher, which came out from 1995 to 2000. So this is before he did this. And that became an AMC series in 2016 and is now going to be finishing up its 4th and final season in September. And that was optioned and made and whatever by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg.
Oh,
the same
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of the test run of like this author, this thing. And Preacher was about and is about in the TV series.
Yeah, I'm aware of it, but I don't really know what it is exactly.
Yeah, so it's about this preacher who develops supernatural superpowers and is going after God to try and understand. It's very much like an anti-religious, at least the comic book is, based on what the author has said. But in describing this work before it was made, Garth Ennis said, the boys would out-preacher, meaning it would be so graphic and so in-your-face gut punch, and it definitely delivered that. So that's how kind of you could see where, there's a little bit of a test of this kind of material while The Boys is floundering in TV development, confusion, and chaos. This other one that this guy had done got made. But this guy, Garth Ennis, is known, looking up a little bit about him, for his lack of interest in superhero characters. So he wrote for Punisher, and he wrote for Nick Fury, which are these characters who are more like renegade mercenary people, because he said he grew up reading British war comics. So he's from across the pond. And he didn't read these superhero things, and he thinks Captain America is a total travesty and making fun of the war and all that kind of stuff. So this was like his big thing. Although Preacher is more known and is more famous in the comic book scene, as far as something that he's done. But I think this show might have more traction because it's directly related to superheroes, which the public nowadays is more familiar with. Like I said, he had these other characters that are not superheroes. And I looked up something else that he had done, which is kind of similar to this and was maybe a bit of a test run. Again, so 1996 to 2001, he had a 60-issue series. He loves doing these almost like chunk series because Preacher was 75 issues. The Boys is 72 issues. So this one that he came up with even before or around the same time as Preacher was called Hitman. And it's not the Hitman from the video games, if anybody knows that. It's a completely separate person, but he was like a Gulf War veteran who then became a contract killer and got like telepathy and smaller superpowers,
Oh.
and then is a mercenary hitman doing jobs and contracts against superpowered
Whoa.
characters that people don't want to be in. Normal hitmen can't be involved with.
Right.
And what's interesting about this is he's from Gotham City, and so this was made by DC and is set in the DC universe.
Oh.
So Superman, Batman, the Joker,
yeah.
Green Lantern, Catwoman, they all appear in this
Good Lord.
60 episode thing, but it's obviously 5 steps back from what he actually wanted to get across as like,
Sure,
I don't like superheroes, this whole thing's messed up. But that's kind of,
that's
it's almost like
fascinating.
a preview,
Yeah.
prequel kind of test if you didn't want a ton
When
of
did
the
he do
graphic.
that?
1996 to 2001.
That's cool.
So also just historically, this The Boys is very much in relation to 9/11 and government conspiracy, even though it came out in 2006.
Okay.
So the plane crash that happens in the television series, I believe, is a bit smaller in nature, or they mess with it a little bit differently. But the one that happens in the comic is a huge part of what's going on in how people are feeling around 2006 and
distrust
and
government
corporations and
9/11,
who's
yeah.
involved and all that stuff. So I might butcher a little bit of the details
Sure.
as far as the comic book, but basically the plane that would be going towards the Twin Towers, either somebody knew about or they didn't know about it, but the superheroes were tasked with stopping it, and that was supposed to look like a good PR stunt or whatever. Like, people knew about what was going on, but then the superheroes royally mess it up. It's the most tragic graphic thing I've ever seen in the comic book, because you can like sense the panic. This team of superheroes that come up and they're like, we don't know what to do, and people are like, save us, and they're like, the oxygen masks, and like people are flying out of the windows, and it's just like awful. And then the main guy, Homelander, who's the Superman-esque thing, he's like, we gotta go. Like, we can't be here. We can't be seen at this, because we can't be seen destroying the plane, you know? And he's like, oh, I'm gonna shift it down. And then he just like completely rips the tail off, and everybody starts chucking out.
Jeez.
And all these and there's one superhero who can't fly, and he's like holding on, and he's like, no, and he just like shoves him off, and then that guy tumbles down.
Oh my god.
It's completely insane. But what happens is, the plane, they do divert it, but it destroys the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh.
And then that's the conspiracy, is like, well, why would they want to destroy the Brooklyn Bridge versus like where it was headed,
Right,
you know,
right,
that kind of thing,
right.
whatever. But that becomes a huge conspiracy and part of the comic book series that I don't know if they're necessarily going to do, but in the time and place of...
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to go. I think that idea, the conspiracy and
government
bridge,
shakedown,
I think
all
that
that.
all went
George
out the window.
Bush, all that
The way
stuff,
the plane
yeah.
accident happens, it happens kind of out of nowhere. There's only one superhero. It's the main guy. Forget his name. You said it earlier.
Homelander.
Yes. There's a scene earlier with the woman who runs the company that owns all of the superheroes, and this guy's meeting with her, and he's basically blackmailing her into getting a lower price for a hero for his city. He's like a mayor of I forget exactly where he's from.
Mm-hmm.
But he's trying to blackmail her because he's aware of Agent V. Is it V?
Or 5, I don't know, I read it, so I never heard
Agent
it said.
5.
Yeah.
But
I
he's
said
aware
V.
of it, and so he's trying to use his knowledge as and they play it very cool and on the top, and anyway, we're like, well, we'll have to agree to disagree or whatever, and they part ways, and you think nothing of it, and then cut back to him in his private plane with his son playing or whatever, and then outside of the windows you just see light eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun is like, what is that? It's dark and misty, and you just see like some glowing eyes out in the distance. You're like, what in the world? And then you cut out and you realize, oh, this isn't gonna be good. And so he just lasers the plane in half basically, and it ends just pretty much like that. It doesn't go crazy graphic with like that,
yeah.
and it definitely, the plane just falls, and you stay with him, and then it cuts back into character.
But they
stuff
might
at
have
different
some
places.
bigger thing in this. Like I said, the show's going to be on for a while.
Yeah.
They have a whole second season. They might throw in like the superheroes trying to help somebody. But that was wild to me. I felt pain,
That
and
seems
tension, and being
crazy.
like, oh, this is what happened if the government like called off the emergency workers and all that stuff, because they were like, no, the superheroes got it. But the superheroes have no training in any of this stuff. They're just like actors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just like super powered actors who are designed to be famous and follow the rules. And then when you have them fly up to the plane, they have no idea what's going on. They're making it way worse. But it's interesting because you'll just see, like, in the first couple episodes, there'll be like, an opening shot of New York in the comic book, and you'll just see the Brooklyn Bridge. Like, I noticed it, and I was like, ooh,
Hmm.
something's going on there. So because Garth had said, he was like, I wanted this to be a 60-episode
We
series.
just trust them because we've been told to. I just needed to say that.
Yeah. But he wanted it, he said, I want it to be a 60-episode series. It ended up being 72 because some other miniseries stuff. But he envisioned it from the beginning as this whole big thing. So it has a huge sense of cohesion as a giant property.
I mean, it feels like it, man. It doesn't feel like TV. It feels like a long movie. Like, it really could just keep, like, I look at it like it could just keep running episode into episode. It's so cinematic and it's so well done, and there's nothing about it that feels like TV. It certainly doesn't have any, like, run-of-the-mill basic TV structure.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah. This thing was actually, just as maybe a final little note to the comic book and how it came to be, was not going to be finished after 6 episodes. So it was through a company called Wildstorm, which was a subsidiary of DC Comics. And like I said, he had worked on, he was working on a bunch of other stuff, but he had worked on this Hitman series. And then he was sort of working on Preacher as well, but that was through a different thing. But they had done the 6 episodes, I keep calling them episodes. I'm sorry if everybody's cringing as I say episodes for comic books. Issues. He had 6. You can quit clenching your teeth. He had 6 issues of these things out, and then Wildstorm dropped them. They were like, we can't make this because of such disdain. Like, their whole property and image is superheroes, and he's making this thing that's like, no, we're gonna kill all the like, this is a mess. So they
we do superheroes, we do them well.
Yeah.
And then the guy like, on the board is like, but they could be really nasty. No, we do them well. We do them well, Mark.
And this guy could be like,
they
Superman.
could be really gross. What if he had a sex addiction? It's like, what? Jesus.
We'll give you 6 issues and then you're done. So it stopped, and then there was a huge fan response on the message boards and everything. They're like, no, this is going to be tight. This is what we want. So then it got picked up by Dynamite Comics, which is some small random thing. And that's who did the rest of
That's awesome.
The 72. Yeah. And he was like, it was so great in hindsight because they gave me so much more creative freedom. If I had stayed with DC, they wouldn't have let me do 99% of everything that I had come up with.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
so look.
Yeah, now look at it. It's a TV show.
It's huge
that Evan could watch. So there was one little thing as I was reading this. The first panel, I was like, "Yo, this main character looks like Simon Pegg." Oh, no joke. I'm going to show you a picture, and listeners, I'll put a link to the picture. But this is the artist This is what the character looks like in the comic book. It's just like an exact drawing of Simon Pegg.
No way.
As a character, yes. And so the artist, because you know how they collaborate, the artist had said, it was a couple different artists over the course of the thing, but the guy who had started it was like, I was extremely inspired because the main character is British, or Butcher is British, and so that's how they relate to each other. Hughie comes from there. And so he is like, I wanted somebody who looked like, rough and ready, but also a little bit naive and like a little bit, that you could have some empathy for.
Yeah.
Like not a completely stuck up, rigid, tough guy.
Right.
But he still has to have some human elements to him. And he was like, I saw Simon Pegg. And so they basically drew him. Simon Pegg writes in one of the, I don't remember where I saw it, but he puts like the foreword to one of the issues of the comics or whatever. And then people were like, when the show is coming out, I wonder. And Simon Pegg was like, no. Like the main character is 20. Like I can't be the main character. Yeah. But in the show, Simon Pegg is Hughie's dad.
Yeah.
He did get in the show. And all the fans are like, bah!
It's pretty, that does make that even a little bit more special. He's good as the dad too, because he's not a typical Simon Pegg character by any stretch. So it's really interesting. Yeah. I've enjoyed that character actually just on its own. And he's
so small.
He's just like a small, weak man trying to like shelter his son, except his son is like, no, you can't shelter and your way out of life.
Yeah.
People will take advantage of you, and you need to get down to the bottom of what's going on, and you need to get to the heart of the truth, because without that, we don't have a real relationship. It's really great. I've only watched 2 episodes.
Yeah. And Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, I'm sure they poured over the comic book, and they have so many little moments and little things like that are fan service that you wouldn't even necessarily know about. I'll put a link. There's a Reddit for The Boys, And people are always posting now that the show's out, like
Yeah.
little moments or little things in the background or little whatever. Like as the Homelander, I found one specific where he's standing there. There's some graffiti in Arabic behind him in one of the scenes. And it translates to Homelander is racist.
Wow.
As graffiti. But that even in and of itself. So there's a TV show called Homeland that came out. And there was a scandal because they had an artist like set design part of the set.
Yeah.
And they wrote in Arabic, Homeland is racist, as like a FU to the show.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
Oh.
So I'll post links to both those articles. But
I didn't know that.
Even within layers upon layers of like reference to
Homelander,
the audience, to other pieces of media.
Wow. Yeah. That's super cool.
I just thought that was incredible.
I didn't know that about Homeland. Yeah. That's wild. That's so wild.
My last little thing that I will say, which I'll also post a link to as always, but this guy, Garth, he had written, like I said, he had written for The Punisher and Nick Fury. He had one standalone special issue that he did of The Punisher called Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. And Punisher goes on a rampage. It's an alternate timeline history thing where Punisher's family are killed by superheroes. And so he goes on a rampage and kills every superhero and supervillain in the Marvel Universe. The cover art for the issue is just all the bodies of every superhero in the Marvel Universe and the Punisher standing on top of it. So that was kind of a weird thing. He's just like really on this kick.
Yeah. Just like taking the idea further.
Yeah.
Making it
his own
thing. You want
thing.
it to be real? Well, we need to confront some stuff that we all need to confront.
Yeah. And that's honestly the beautiful thing about it is it gives you a chance to think about, like I said, as the prescriptive versus the cautionary. Like, what would this look like? There's good and bad to everybody. If we just idolize and demonize,
and why do we
nowhere.
trust? How easily are we trusted? And how are we bought into it?
Yeah.
We just trust them because why? Who? We like celebrities because what? And we think they're who?
Yeah.
We don't know them.
But also not to throw them completely under the bus either and be like, we don't know their history. Yeah.
Just don't know them.
Yeah.
And because I think we forget.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that we don't actually know these people.
Politicians,
celebrities, anyone in a position of power that you're not actually dealing with face to face in a working professional, even in a and any kind of relationship. I mean,
and that's why we need The Boys to remind us.
God, I love the title.
Yeah. Because it's exactly the opposite. It's not about The Boys. That's why I was turned off by it. We talked about
exactly
this a little bit off mic. It's like, oh, you hear about a show called The Boys about
superheroes?
Like anti-superheroes. I was like, oh yeah, another
that's exactly what happened to me.
Generic show.
I saw like a couple ads. I saw a couple images. The Boys didn't even register. Nope. Those things don't add to anything that I'm interested in right now. Like, it's just not. I was like, well, certainly not challenging content.
Yeah. Certainly a superhero show called The Boys about a group of superheroes called The Boys. Well,
I'm sure they're gonna have a lot of fun. That's basically all I was thinking. I'm like, I'm sure it's gonna be a hoot. But no, it was. It's excruciating, and I don't want to watch it.
Well, you don't have to because we're done with it for the
But I will. But thank you so much, though.
Yeah.
This has been a blast.
Yeah.
The announcements. IndieBound. If you're interested, check out our IndieBound link. It's in our show notes. You have to click on the link in the show notes to get the deal, but help out some local bookstores and help out the show as well. Mm-hmm. Or Book of the Month. This month's code is FLEX, FLEX. This will save you $5 on this month's code. Instead of 15, you get 10, and it helps out the show as well.
And you can get a young adult book to your door.
And then leave some stars for us. We got no stars, y'all.
Well, we got a few, but we need more.
We have a few, but we can always use more. And we know y'all have some stars to give. So why don't y'all hop on it, doggone it, and leave us some stars.
And it will help other people find us.
It'll help us out a lot. But anyway, love you guys. Thank you for listening. This has been great. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
We'll catch you guys next week.
All right, bye.